to shift. This wasn't 2 or 3 bikes. This was dozens, maybe more. The ground trembled as headlights began to glow at the end of his street. One after another, motorcycles turned the corner, chrome gleaming, exhausts roaring. Neighbors peeked through curtains, some stepping out onto porches with frowns and folded arms. James rose slowly to his feet. His hand tightened around the porch railing. Alana's eyes were wide. "Grandpa, they're coming here." The procession stretched as far as he could see, Hell's Angels patches on jackets, the red and white insignia catching in the streetlights. They weren't just passing through. They were arriving. Engines idled as the first riders pulled up to his yard. One dismounted, pulling off his helmet. Big Mike, towering, weathered, but with a steady gaze. "You James Carter?" he asked. James hesitated, then nodded. "I am." Big Mike extended a hand, firm and deliberate. "Then it's an honor to meet you, brother." Neighbors whispered furiously from their porches. Some muttered about trouble coming to town. Others just stared, stunned, at the sight of a man they had mocked being saluted by one of the most feared biker groups in the country. But James wasn't thinking about them. He was staring at the hand stretched before him. Slowly, he reached out and clasped it. In that moment, something shifted. The silence he had carried for months cracked, replaced by the roar of solidarity. For the first time since selling his Harley, James felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. The night air shook with the thunder of engines. The line of Harleys stretched so far down the road that James lost count. Their headlights painted the street in gold and shadow. Their chrome gleamed like fire under the lamps. Neighbors stood frozen, whispering nervously, their judgments hanging in the humid air. For years, James had endured their sneers and muttered slurs. Tonight, they could barely breathe as the Hell's Angels, men, they feared and ridiculed in equal measure, rolled in like a storm and stopped at his house. James stood tall on his porch, the screen door creaking as Alana peeked from behind him. Her small fingers clutched his shirt, her eyes wide with both fear and wonder. Big Mike removed his gloves and helmet, tucking them under his arm. The others idled quietly, their exhausts popping softly in the stillness. It was rare for the Angels to ride so deep into a small southern town. Rarer still to stop for one man. "Sir," Big Mike said, his voice low but carrying, "we didn't ride all this way for trouble. We came for respect." The word startled James. Respect was a language he hadn't heard much in years. "Respect?" he repeated cautiously. Big Mike nodded. "Word of what you did reached us. You gave up your Harley, your pride, for your granddaughter's life. That ain't weakness. That's the strongest thing a man can do. We heard, and we ain't the kind of men to sit quiet when someone shows that kind of heart." He turned slightly, gesturing to the long line of bikers behind him. "We rode here to let you know you're not alone." Gasps rippled through the watching neighbors. A few muttered, "What's he done to deserve that?" Others shook their heads in disbelief. They had mocked James for months, calling him foolish, weak, desperate. Now, some of the roughest men in America were calling him brother. James swallowed hard. He wasn't a man who sought attention. His life had been built on endurance, silent battles, private sacrifices. To have this sudden storm of roaring engines and leather-clad men at his doorstep left him unsure how to stand. Alana tugged at his shirt. "Grandpa, are they here for you?" He glanced down at her, his stern eyes softening. "Looks like it, baby girl." Big Mike stepped forward, lowering his voice so only James could hear. "Brother, we know what it costs to let go of a Harley. For men like us, that bike ain't just metal. It's a lifetime. You gave that up to save family. That's bigger than pride. That's love." Another rider, older, with silver in his beard, added, "We buried brothers who would have done the same. You got the heart of a rider, James Carter. Don't matter what patch you wear or don't wear." James felt a lump rising in his throat. Vietnam had taught him not to cry in front of men, not to show weakness. But this wasn't weakness. This was something else. "I didn't do it for anyone to notice," James said quietly. "I did it because my granddaughter's life comes first. That's all." Big Mike smiled faintly. "That's exactly why we noticed." The street buzzed with tension. Some neighbors whispered about calling the sheriff. Others clutched their children tighter, their prejudices mixing with fear. Yet no one dared step forward. One man across the street, a notorious loudmouth who had mocked James before, finally shouted, "Why y'all riding in here for him? He don't deserve it. He's just some broke old man." The roar of dozens of engines suddenly spiked, drowning his voice. The angels revved in unison, a wall of sound that shook windows and sent the heckler stumbling backward. Silence followed. Big Mike didn't even glance at the man. Instead, he looked back at James. "We don't answer fools. We stand with brothers." The angels began dismounting one by one. Boots hit the pavement. The street filled with the heavy scent of oil, leather, and loyalty. They weren't there for a fight, they were there to show presence. A silent declaration that this man, James Carter, was not invisible. One of them stepped forward with something draped in a dark tarp. Together, two men pulled it closer and set it down in front of James's yard. They tugged the tarp free. Underneath sat a Harley. Not new, but shining, polished, cared for. The chrome reflected the porch light, and the black paint gleamed as though it had been waiting for this moment. Alana gasped. James's breath caught. "You gave up yours," Big Mike said, his voice steady. "So we're giving one back. Ain't charity, ain't pity. It's respect. A rider should never be without his iron horse." James stared at the bike, then at the men. He opened his mouth, closed it again, his words stumbling over emotion he hadn't expected. Finally, he managed, I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," the silver-bearded rider said gently. "Just ride when you're ready." Neighbors stood in stunned silence. The same people who had laughed when James pushed his Harley down the driveway weeks ago now watched as an army of bikers handed him back his dignity, his pride, his brotherhood. But James knew it wasn't about the machine. It was about being seen, respected, uplifted after years of being dragged down. Alana squeezed his hand. "Grandpa, it's like they're angels." James chuckled softly, though his eyes glistened. "In their own way, baby girl, I suppose they are." Big Mike clapped him on the shoulder. "We'll stay a while, let this town know exactly where you stand." They won't forget it. And as the night stretched on, the street filled with laughter, engines, and a brotherhood that racism could not erase. For the first time in years, James Carter felt like he wasn't fighting the world alone. The rumble of Harleys still echoed through the neighborhood, long after the sun dipped below the horizon. Porch lights flicked on one by one, casting nervous glows across yards where neighbors gathered in uneasy clusters. Some glared, others whispered, but no one dared step onto James Carter's street. "Not tonight." James stood on his porch with Alana by his side, the new Harley gleaming under the streetlight like a promise. Big Mike and the other Hells Angels lingered nearby, their presence a shield against the weight of a town that had long tried to grind him down. But in every small town, there are always a few men too proud or too hateful to stay quiet. Around 9 o'clock, a pickup truck rattled down the street. Its headlights glared like eyes filled with malice. In the back stood two young men with beer bottles, laughing and shouting. The driver, Hank Pritchard, was a local troublemaker known for his drunken tirades and his family's deep-seated racism. "Hey, old man," Hank yelled as the truck slowed near James's house. "Looks like you called in your little gang, huh?" "Thought you'd scare us?" The angels didn't flinch. Big Mike stood tall, arms crossed over his leather vest. The rest of the riders lined the street, their silence louder than any words. Hank sneered. "You think you're one of them now, Carter? You think they care about you? You're nothing but—" Before he could finish, Big Mike's voice cut through the night like a blade. "Watch your tongue, boy." The street went quiet. The angels didn't move, but the weight of their presence was enough to make the drunk men in the truck shift nervously. Hank wasn't smart, but he wasn't completely foolish either. He glanced at the long row of Harleys gleaming in the moonlight, at the heavy boots planted firmly on the pavement, and at the tattoos that told stories of violence and loyalty. He swallowed hard but pushed forward anyway, too stubborn to back down. "This is our town," Hank spat. "We don't need outsiders riding in, telling us who we can or can't respect." Big Mike stepped closer, his boots echoing against the pavement. He stopped just inches from the truck's front bumper. "Respect don't belong to a town. Respect belongs to a man, and James Carter has more of it than you ever will." A murmur of agreement rolled through the angels. James stood frozen, torn between gratitude and fear. He didn't want bloodshed on his street, Not with Alana watching from the porch. "Mike," he said softly, his voice steady.